Free and open source software has become a critical part of the modern economy. It has been estimated that FOSS constitutes 80 to 90% of any given piece of modern software. According to the latest Synopsys report, 99% of code bases audited in 2019 contained open source components, and more than 70% of the audited code base is made up of open source. The fact is that open source dominates the world. The downside of this dominance of open source is that there are more vulnerabilities in open source. According to the Synopsys report, 75% of the code base they audited in 2019 contained at least one public vulnerability. It's an alarming increase from the 60% of 2018. It's nearly reaching the 78% of 2017. It should technically go down, but it's going up. They also report that an average of 82 vulnerabilities were identified per code base, and 4 of the top 10 vulnerabilities found in the 2019 audited code base did not have CVs associated with them. Most of these vulnerabilities don't even get added to the National Vulnerability Database. Even more alarming is the fact that the percentage of high-risk vulnerabilities increased to 49% in 2019 as opposed to only 40% in 2018. Polyverse maintains a Linux weakness report, and according to the latest report, Red Hat Enterprise Linux has over 672,880 weaknesses. The point I'm trying to make here is that contrary to the popular opinion, open source code base has as many vulnerabilities as popular proprietary software. As we all know, bugs are part of software development process. This is not a problem unique to open source. Every software has bugs, and those bugs become security issues or vulnerabilities. What is seen as the strength of open source, which is it is distributed and not controlled by one company, so its security doesn't rely on one vendor, is also its biggest weakness. Due to this distributed nature, there is no centralized authority to ensure quality and maintenance. As we all know, that security is still an afterthought for most developers because it's a complex problem to solve. Another facet of open source that makes security more challenging is the fact that anyone can copy, modify, and further redistribute the code. There is no single source to ensure the hygiene of the code. The result is a massive deployment of technologies that have vulnerabilities in them, and there is not much that can be done in its current state until now. The Linux Foundation has a dedicated project called CII, or Core Infrastructure Initiative, to address security of open source software. It is funding and sponsoring many efforts to increase security of open source. The foundation has joined hands with the Laboratory of Innovation Science at Harvard to address this problem. Earlier this year, the two organizations came out with a report titled Vulnerability in the Core, a preliminary report and census 2 of open source software. This census 2 analysis and report represent important steps towards understanding and addressing structural and security complexities in the modern day software supply chain, which is dominated by open source. Using the report as a foundation, the two organizations have created a survey for FLOSS contributors. The goal of the survey is to identify how to improve security, including the sustainability of the FOSS ecosystem, because as I said earlier, the whole world runs on open source. Today we have with us Jenny Hoffman, Assistant Director of Research Management, Laboratory for Innovation Science at Harvard, who will tell us a bit more about the survey and why we need to participate in it.
I'm Jenny Hoffman from the Laboratory for Innovation Science at Harvard, and I'd like to encourage you to take a few minutes today to strengthen the open source ecosystem by participating in the free, Libre, and open source software contributor survey. As more and more of our daily life moves into the digital space, it's becoming even more critical to support the open source software that underpins the world's complex information systems. That's why Harvard has partnered with the Linux Foundation's Core Infrastructure Initiative to reach out directly to open source developers to identify how to best improve the security and sustainability of their projects. The Core Infrastructure Initiative takes a holistic, collaborative, and preemptive approach to strengthening cybersecurity. We know that important projects struggling with contributor burnout or vulnerable to supply chain attacks may need as much assistance as those facing traditional security threats. Responses from developers like you will help us guide valuable support and resources to the open source projects that need them most. So please don't delay. Click on the link below to start the survey and make your voice heard in the movement to secure and sustain open source.
Thank you, Jenny, for your message. And back to our audience, if you are a developer or maintainer of any open source project, please take 10 to 15 minutes out of your time and take this survey. I have added the link up in the cards. The survey ends in August, so hurry up. And as Jenny said, let's make open source more secure. Thanks for watching. See you next time.